On behalf of Interfaith Alliance for Safer Community, the G20 Forum Association, the International Justice Mission of Philippines, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I would like to thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule and joining us today. I would like also to extend our sincere thanks to our colleagues from the church for hosting us. Communities across the world are facing many interlinked crises, such as violence, conflict, widening inequality, and climate change. Vulnerable people are the most impacted by these challenges. We have been collaborating we've been collaborating with the G20 Interfaith Forum on a global effort to shape the agenda of the 2023 G20 Summit and beyond that, to ensure that the vulnerable people are not left behind. We have jointly organized two major events, one in Abu Dhabi in December and the second forum in New Delhi last May, where groups of international stakeholders came together to identify solutions, to develop recommendations for G20 leaders. However, we want to ensure that regional viewpoints and challenges are captured in these recommendations. The global South does not often have a voice at the table. We want to ensure that this is not the case. We are organizing a series of workshops across the world. The first is being held here in Manila and will be followed by similar meetings in Brasilia, in New York, London, Berlin, Istanbul, and Nairobi. Our discussion today will focus on 5 themes: online exploitation of children, climate change, trafficking, education, freedom of religion or belief. We will start today's event with a panel discussion where a group of experts will share their insights on today's focus themes and areas. I would like to invite to the stage my dear friend, Professor Cole, President of the G20 Interfaith Forum, who will be moderating the panel discussion. Professor Cole, please, floor is yours.
Thank you. It's a good thing I have bad posture. I can just bend over a little bit. My grandmother, when I was little, would always say, "Stand up straight." And I'd say, "Can't, Grandma, it hurts." So anyway, it's a real pleasure to be here and to see this group that's come together in the Philippines. We know your expertise. We know the amount of time and devotion you're giving to work in your various fields, and we're very grateful to be able to meet with you here. We have a special thanks to the International Alliance for Safer Communities. Hamid just spoke to us. We're also very grateful to be hosted here at the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Manila. We're thankful for a broad spectrum of people who have been able to join us from different areas. Let me just say a few words by way of background to give a little bit more context for what we hope we'll be able to do here. We have been working as the G20 Interfaith Forum for the past decade. Basically, we've held major meetings in connection with the G20 Summit each year, and each year we've been getting better and better at being able to have impact on the overall G20 process. As you know, the G20 It's actually a little bit of a misnomer because it includes 19 countries plus the EU, so it's more like 50 countries. But the G20 represents something like 80% of global output, a similar percentage of global territory and global population, so that it's very significant and influential. It's a little bit informal. It does not have the careful formal structure of the United Nations, but in many areas it's able to work more flexibly and more effectively. So our thought, beginning with Australia and then in each of the years since, they say what happens in the G20, if you're not familiar with it, is that one of the member nations becomes the host country each year. So we met first in when the G20 was in Australia. The next year it was in Turkey, then China, then let me think about this, Germany, Argentina, Japan, Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia was the year of COVID, so they would have had the largest religious gathering of religious leaders in history in Saudi Arabia, but they had to do it online because of COVID. We then met in Italy and last year in Indonesia, this part of the world, this year in India, next year in Brazil, the year after that in South Africa. One of the things that we have found is that it's extremely important to have the religious voices involved in the shaping of policy. Depending on the country, there are different levels of affinity with religious groups. As you can imagine, it was a minor miracle that we were able to meet in China. We had some good friends at the Chinese Academy of Social Science that included us in one of their conferences. But it goes from there to countries who are very friendly toward religion. In my analysis, as I think through G20 countries, some of those that are most deferential to the voices coming from the religious sector are Canada, the US, the UK, Germany, Italy. Well, that's 5 of the G7 right there. And in many ways, there are many areas, think about nuclear disarmament or things like that. That is just totally paralyzed in the United Nations, but much of the work in that area is actually going on in the G20 or G7 setting. Things have obviously become more complicated with Ukraine and Russia right now, but the G20 remains one of the important policy formation areas in the world. And in many respects, the G20 emerged. It was organized earlier, but it really came to the fore after the 2008 economic crash. And not surprisingly, much of its work is focused on economics, finance ministries, and so forth. But over the past decade, we have witnessed a progressive tendency for countries as they choose their priorities to choose priorities that align with the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. Things like, and I'm not going to try to name all 17, but minimizing hunger, poverty, promoting equality, education, healthcare, the climate, environment, good governance, and I could go on. But all of these areas are areas which deal with the plight of the vulnerable. And these are areas that religious communities have been concerned about and have been active in dealing with for longer than we have had nation states. For a variety of historical reasons, a number of more secular government leaders tend to worry about dealing with religion. To them, sometimes religion looks like a can of worms that they don't want to open because there is a lot of diversity, as we know, in the religious field. But one of the things we've learned at the G20 Interfaith Forum is that working with interfaith groups on issues of common concern can be an area where groups really come together, pull together, and have major significance and impact. Religious communities tend to be better connected from the top international levels down to the grassroots than most organizations. They tend to be, depending on the particular group and how they're ecclesiastically organized, they're likely to have international aspects of their work. Certainly they have co-religionists in other parts of the world. And they have tremendous experience, practical experience, and networks that can really make a difference in some of the areas that people want to work on. So it's a real mistake for global policy leaders not to take religious thinking, religious experience, religious recommendations into account. And for that reason, we've been working actively over the past decade to provide a platform where people from religious backgrounds, and it may be the religious groups themselves, the religious leaders, religious actors, but also can be people in government who are concerned about these issues but have religious backgrounds. Religion and business can be very significant. There's an often quoted statistic is something like 80% of the world's population has religious affiliation. Those of us in this group would know that that affiliation is pretty loose in some regards, but still it's significant that it's a factor. And we're convinced that bringing religious insights to the table is important. In the policy world, if you're not at the table, the risk is that you're on the menu. And we really need to do what we can to promote deeper understanding and contribute, because by building the partnerships with government, with public officials, and doing that in responsible ways, we can really have a significant impact. I think in particular in this part of the world, obviously Philippines is one of the major members of ASEAN. I think ASEAN is in the process right now of developing a long-term vision and strategy. One of the things that is clear is that each of the ASEAN nations, the basic situation is most of, if not all of the nations, have either a dominant religion or a dominant ideology, but that dominant group, what's dominant in one country is a minority group in other countries. And religious believers tend to be conscious of what's happening to their co-religionists. And if we don't find ways of working together across borders, finding ways and pathways of mutual respect, it's hard to imagine ASEAN coming fully together in the way it would like to come together. It is, after all, 8 to 9% of the total population on Earth, has some very significant countries. And from my perspective, Philippines is one of the countries that is really one of the leading jurisdictions in terms of the quality of human rights protections, and so there's much leadership that can come from this country. So with that in mind, we have come here. We're as Hamed mentioned, we're in the process of an ongoing process of reaching out and trying to connect with different parts of the world. I would say in the early years of our organization, we did one major conference each year at the time of the G20 Summit. But what we've realized over time is that we need to be able to think and draw input from different parts of the world, frankly. For example, this year we had a meeting in Ethiopia. One of our major recommendations this year is that the African Union be become part of the G20 the same way that the European Union is. We should maybe think this along the same lines for ASEAN. The truth is that the major regional organizations tend to be invited, but in Africa, for example, there is one G20 member, South Africa, and it's quite different from much of the rest of the African continent. But many of the key problems on Earth are being faced there, and that is, so it's important that we take into account those kind of issues. I know when Indonesia was the host of the G20, they wanted to make the point that there is much that can be learned from this part of the world that other parts of the world, historically the colonizers, if I can speak frankly, that other parts of the world really need to learn from. And I think that's part of the reason why we wanted to come here, as well as other places where we've been doing similar meetings. So what we're hoping, we've chosen some issues that we know from talking to others here are significant practical issues that are being wrestled with by many of your groups. We're honored that you can be here and take some time. We're looking for, in the split out groups, for ideas, thoughts, recommendations, things that we can be learning, things that we should be trying to pass on to global leaders. And we're very thankful for your participation. So let me stop talking and just introduce the opening panel. And if these could just come to the stand, and they're going to make brief presentations. We hope we'll have some time left for questions and comments from the audience after they make their presentations. But first, Attorney Noel Ibaye, Director of the National Law Enforcement and Investigations Development. And there's only one way to get up to the stage unless you want to pole vault. So if you can come over that way and just come and take a chair. Next on education, Ms. Bai Rohinisa Sumdad Usman, Founder and Executive Director of Teach Peace, Build Peace Movement, Incorporated. We know that with regard to the trafficking issue, Assistant State Prosecutor Jinky Dendumo is on her way. So she heads the NAIA Task Force Against Trafficking. We're hoping she'll be able to join us during the session. And if you see someone walking up on stage, that's what that is about. And then Attorney Nasser Marahoma Salek, Commissioner of the National Amnesty Commission. If we could have the four of those come on stage, and we'll just let them start. They're taking 5 or a few more minutes than that each, and they can each tell you a little bit more about how they're coming at these issues. The idea has been to have this session to start thinking about some of the issues that are covered by the different concurrent sessions, and we'll just proceed in that order. So, Attorney Noel Ibaye, if you're more comfortable just sitting and talking, that's fine too.
So good morning, everyone. Thank you for inviting IJM to speak today, and I am privileged to speak on behalf of IJM on the emerging challenges of online sexual exploitation of children. So when we speak of challenges, there are many, especially when we talk about online sexual abuse and exploitation of children. And from the name itself of the crime, we can see that there are two important words that we need to focus on, and that is, one is it's a crime that is being done online, And the other one is it's a crime that is being done to our children. So first I'd like to give a brief discussion on what is this crime all about? What is OSAEC or OSEC? So in brief terms, OSAEC is a crime that is focused on the creation, the distribution, and the production of child sexual abuse and exploitation materials. And I'd like to really focus on that this is a crime on the creation of a material. And the material is child sexual abuse and exploitation material, or CSAM. This is a material that depicts a child that is doing a sexual activity. And more often than not, these children are being used by facilitators or perpetrators into doing these sexual acts, and these sexual acts are captured on video or live streaming. It can be live streamed, or images, mere images that are circulated and sold in the World Wide Web through different channels. So this is done online, but it is also combined with offline acts. Sometimes it is started offline, but then it transcends online. And when we talk about OSAEC, it captures everything as long as it involves the abuse and exploitation of a child being done online. So you may have heard of these crimes in the news, such as sextortion, for example. When we speak about sextortion, it is when children are being scammed into producing their own images. And when these images are taken by the one who facilitated the production of these images, then they will be extorted into giving money, for example, or else these pictures will be circulated online. So that's just an example of online. These are self-produced images, but we at IGM, we think that the worst subset of online sexual exploitation of children is the live streaming of these materials. So when we speak of live streaming, these materials are being produced by perpetrators that are here in the Philippines. Our casework shows that majority of these perpetrators are within the circle of trust of these children, especially the parents, and they live stream the sexual abuse being done to their own children to demand-side customers. So when I say demand-side customers, these are customers that are very interested and are directing the production of these materials, and these materials are produced in the Philippines. So important to note for all of us that usually in online sexual exploitation of children, there are two perpetrators. There's a perpetrator here in the Philippines, and there's a perpetrator abroad that is viewing, that is buying these materials. So what are the emerging challenges that we see? One is awareness, and this is where I think our Interfaith Alliance is very useful, because as a policy advocate group, our voices are very influential to policy and government. So one is awareness, and this is online safety for children, because our children now are very tapped into these social media platforms. So they need to be aware of how to protect themselves. And of course, the very basic fact of the children themselves knowing what the crime is. Because in our experience, we have encountered and rescued children that have been abused by their own parents or by their own people in their circle of trust for 4 years. And they still went to school every day, but then when they went home, they were being abused, and they didn't tell anybody about it. They didn't tell their parents, they didn't tell their teachers. So, and also my time is up, but I'd like to emphasize the fact that OSEC is a global crime, and it needs global collaboration between the countries of the source countries and the demand side countries. Because what we're finding now is that the penalties in the demand side countries are lower than the source countries. So for example, in the Philippines, it's life imprisonment. In other countries, they view it as mere viewing of child pornography, which is very low, like 2 years. So that is where I think we can advocate for stronger penalties in those countries. And of course, since it's a global crime, there needs to be global collaboration and information sharing between law enforcement, not just here in the Philippines, but in other countries. So in other words, local law enforcement globally should coordinate with each other to tackle the problem on both ends. So that's all. Thank you very much.
A peaceful morning, everyone. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May peace and mercy be upon you all. On behalf of our organization, Teach Peace, Build Peace Movement, thank you so much for making us part of this regional G20 Interfaith meeting as we strengthen our partnerships for the safety and well-being of our children. In Teach Peace, Build Peace Movement, it has been our mission to make every Filipino child and youth a peace hero through holistic, strategic peace education programs for children both in conflict zones and non-conflict zones. To help our children cope up with their struggles and challenges brought about by conflict and violence, we have been using creative strategies, activities, and learning resources that promote a culture of peace, that cultivate knowledge, skills, attitudes, values, and behaviors to have a harmonious relationship with oneself, with others, and with the environment. Sadly, stories of conflict and violence being experienced by our young people have worsened in the past years. And more different forms of conflict and violent narratives continue to influence our young ones to take the path of violent ways. In our organization, we believe that it is vital to develop children's ability to foster peace in their formative years, which is the critical period in a child's development, by teaching them to understand and accept cultural and religious diversity and racial and individual differences. We believe that every child has an innate quality of tolerance and unbiasedness, and that prejudice is subsequently learned later in life. And we have to transform and empower the younger generations to be prime movers and to look at our society through lenses of peace. These are our guiding principles. Our peace education activities are also based on United Nations guidance, particularly UNICEF's Program of Action on the Culture of Peace. It is also through UNICEF's Rights of the Children that we are guided on how we treat our peace hero children and youth and how we can design our programs. So for this morning, I want to highlight 3 main good practices and challenges in relation to children's rights. First, children have the right to be protected from abuse and harm and must show care and kindness for others. From the right to be protected from abuse and harm, we also educate our children to build peaceful relationships with others and be champions for this right themselves. Bullying, discrimination, and stereotyping experienced by children and youth in our implementation sites had led to inner struggles with negative emotions that were difficult for them to understand and handle. At the beginning of our program, there were children who felt hopeless. There were children who stopped dreaming and believing in themselves and stopped dreaming and believing that they can reach for their dreams. They stopped schooling at one point in their lives as a student, felt unaccepted to the point of being scared of interacting with other people, revengeful and depressed. In our sessions, children were always so emotional when they talk about their challenges in life. And as they were going through our peace education lessons or sessions, the children expressed how their sessions have been helping them understand and manage, especially when they are angry, sad, or stressed out. They put much emphasis on learning much about getting to know themselves better and developing their knowledge and skills to become a peace builder. One of the things that we have to really take note of is the importance of teaching our kids the importance of cultivating inner peace at a very young age. Second, children have the right to be taken seriously and share their views and ideas. Children must also listen to others and respect others' views and ideas. So TPBPM conducts community consultations and needs assessments. This is to ensure that all our modules and our sessions are contextualized in every school, in every community, in accordance to their situation, in accordance to their context, in accordance to their religion. Children and youth leaders have undergone continuous training sessions that address current and real-time peace and conflict issues. This is for them to understand and manage what's happening around them, at the same time, how to respond to those struggles. I can further explain this later on if there's a chance. Lastly, children have the right to good health care. Health is commonly viewed as physical health, but most of the time, mental health, again, we all know this, the importance of mental health or emotional health are often neglected, especially for children and youth in the conflict areas. Children express how much the Peace with Self sessions help them cope up with unpleasant situations they've experienced. If you remember what happened in Marawi City, so there's still a lot of kids trying to cope up with that situation. And for those we have trained, coming from the youth sector, they also have expressed how our sessions helped in serving their communities and also being protectors themselves, being peace heroes or peace champions themselves. So for several years of doing this kind of mission, one of the things that we really, our call to action to everyone is to integrate peace education in every school and in every community. We strongly believe that we have to teach peace to build a culture of peace, because it is in building a culture of peace that we can create different generations of peace heroes. Maraming salamat po. A peaceful day, everyone. Assalamu alaikum.
I belong to the Philippine Council for Islam and Democracy. We are connoisseur of developments, studying the place of Islam and democracy in this increasing world of mixed populations and I dare say confusion. As you know, there is an Islamic resurgence in Muslim Mindanao, the region of the Bangsamoro. And this resurgence is sometimes carried out, or for a long time carried out through ways and means of revolution. And so what I will speak to you is important. And I seek your indulgence because I was wished to request for additional minutes. And I prepared my speech, my lecture today, and I entitled it, Licentious Liberalism Towards the End of Faith. On and on, the world is getting multicultural. Every country burgeoning with migrant and transient populations, especially in the West, who bring with them their peculiarities and belief systems. They will boost in number as trade, exchange of labor, and practice of profession get liberalized more and more, not to mention the faddish appeal of the industry of vacation tourism, among others. No doubt, the social and commercial transnationalization serves to dilute hitherto cultural prejudices held by the host and migrant populations for each other. But tension arises as it did where the migrant population dismissed and refused to partake of the liberal and permissive culture of the host country, clinging in earnest to their identity, indigeneity, and ethnicity shaped by the normative standards of morality and religion. In our industrial age, run by digital technology, social life in most Western countries go by the ways and means of liberalism. Its residents of mostly city slickers and worldly-wise workforce are willing to act out their intentions and desires overboard and exceed of the limits of reason and necessity, nay, with impudence and enmeshment of the normative standards of decency and propriety in religion. To beat their rivals or swipe away obstacles to go ahead or merely to express their contempt. The cartoon drawing is a case in point which depicts Prophet Muhammad with a turban shaped like a bomb. This is a perfect example of the unbridled and licentious exercise of freedom of religion and expression in liberal and secular democracies in the West. Prophet Muhammad has no picture taken during his lifetime, and any representation about him in art form is prohibited and considered an act of sacrilege in Islam. In his portraiture in some media outfit in the West, the Prophet was a misshapen face and head, which puts notice on everybody of the atrocious intentions of the author to stir crazy the ummah of the Prophet and denigrate Islam. Maududi, a renowned Pakistani thinker, so early the strain between liberalism or secular materialism and ethical and spiritual regimen of religion as played out in the United States. When he took further studies there in the 1950s. While taken to the material progress of the country, he denounced its social ways and manners. To paraphrase him as a throwback to primitive times, Maududi counseled them, material progress should not outgrow spiritual progress. Freedom of religion and expression is born of liberalism. Ironically, it does not nurture or underpin it. And then, in fact, it will subvert it, as it did, like it were an advantageous outgrowth. Gorged on licentious liberality, any city is a sordid picture of scams and corruption. Its slum districts, a jumble of honky tonks. Commercial hub, a seller of intoxicants and bistros of perbotim and junk food. Parks and beaches, some promenade of broads in skimpy and swanky outfit, carrying on romantic dalliance with hanks to the living look of felony eyes. Finding themselves in extremis in such a social milieu of liberalism, Muslims are hard put to live out their Muslim ways, not to mention the spiritual regimen of the faith. So those Christians who take seriously the demands of their faith. Liberalism may bring society into a spiritually and livable realm for the adherents of the Abrahamic faith. In much of the Christian hemisphere, churches are half empty during the Sabbath days and important holidays. In urban cities in non-Muslim areas, Muslims escape private prayers and other rites, not to mention their acculturation to living the fast lane, which demands especially of the young folks to indulge in alcoholism and promiscuity to unwind. The practice of liberalism among the Christians who are lax in the observance of modesty and similar moral standards of religion on interpersonal relation posed a challenge. By their number and as heads of various socio-civic organizations, the laity could do much to help the clergy to arrest the train. Licentious liberality is anathema to the Abrahamic faith. Nevertheless, Muslims are an optimistic lot. In bad times in the past, this road towards the revivalism of their faith in its golden refulgence. With their programmatic training in the tradition of the Prophet, they imbibe the Muslim character, the resoluteness to pursue the quest to become a righteous man whom God promised the gift of power that will enable him to control the sun, the moon, and the stars. Man does not only wait for the eternal felicity of life in the hereafter, but the derivative heaven established by the righteous among them during their existential reality here in the world of man. God says in many verses of the Quran that man is his best creation. He is therefore invested with potentials, especially the virtues of righteousness among them, to become a super soul, and with God's leave, able to control the sun, the moon, and the star, as is enshrined in the Quran. In brief, man is not only a pious being, observing the moral and spiritual regimen of faith, but also full of competences to build and preside over a civilization that will place the natural world in its control. This kind of civilization could be brought about by the discovery and application by man of scientific verities. The Quran is replete with the scientific truths which are brought only to the public mind with the advancement of science and technology in our contemporary times. My point is, I wish to raise the level of our dialogic discussion on God's grand design for man, especially during the span of his existential reality in the universe. I took liberties and thought that the Christians also shared the Islamic outlook on man as the inheritor of God's kingdom on earth. Our Father, the daily prayer in Christianity, posited this view. And I quote, "Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." In the verses of the Bible, the followers of Jesus Christ are enjoined also to be righteous. This must have a teleological significance. That is, the establishment by man of a derivative kingdom of God on earth or the universe. Adherents of the two Islamic faiths may do well to bind themselves in this enterprise of establishing a civilization where they control the natural world and live their lives together in peace and harmony and contentment. Towards this end, they should live by the normative standards of religion and shun the ways of licentious liberality and develop their God-giving competencies. Thank you.
Handed a note that Jinky Dudumo will not be able to be with us, and attorney Laura Sanchez has kindly offered to come to the stand, and she's already here, and to fill in this gap in our program. So thank you so much, and I'll let you say a little bit more about your work and then your 5 minutes. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Lara Sanchez from the Interagency Council Against Trafficking of the Department of Justice. I work with Fiscal Jinky Didumo. She's part of the NAIA Anti-Trafficking Task Force Against Trafficking. Meanwhile, I'm in the Secretariat under the Office of the Undersecretary. So before I begin, let me share a video from IACAT. Thank you. I'm just going to share a quick presentation that was intended for the breakout session. I just want to let you know that Fiscal Jinky knows that I am presenting on her behalf. We talked before I went on stage. So I'm just going to share something quickly. As intended for the breakout session, so we're improvising. So this is the National Situationer on Trafficking in Persons as prepared by the Interagency Council Against Trafficking. So just a quick introduction, the Interagency Council Against Trafficking was created under the anti-trafficking law here in the Philippines. First, RA 9208 in 2003, which was amended twice. The recent amendment was last year. And there are also other anti-trafficking laws here in the Philippines, which is flashed before your screen. The Interagency Council Against Trafficking is composed of 28 member organizations and government agencies. As you can see, IGM is also our colleague at the IACAT, as well as other government agencies. So, as to the vulnerabilities of the Philippines in terms of human trafficking, bakit po prone ang Pilipinas sa human trafficking? First of all, we have poverty and then border porosity. We have social issues and the tradition of diaspora in the country. So we all want to go somewhere else for better, greener pastures. So those are the roots of, or the vulnerabilities of human trafficking. In the Philippines, there are several routes to human trafficking. It could be done via commercial flights. Can be done through backdoor exits by sea. And then there's a backdoor in Zamboanga, or the Zamba Sulta. Zamboanga, Basilan, Sulu, Tawi-Tawi. And there's also a backdoor exit in Palawan. By backdoor exit, we mean that they leave the country without using the proper channels. But for the commercial flights, even if they leave by proper channels, they do not use the proper documents, or the documents are falsified, or they do not declare their actual travel purpose. Hold on. So what are the emerging trends of trafficking in persons in the Philippines? First, we have online sexual abuse and exploitation of children, which was discussed by Attorney Noel. Second is TIP facilitated by information and communications technology. And then backdoor exits by sea, which I briefly discussed a while ago. So in terms of TIP, facilitated by use of information and communication technology, I might probably focus on this. So first is the Golden Triangle Labor Trafficking Scam. First, it's by cryptocurrency scams or romance scams. So first, there are victims who are lured to romance or to invest in cryptocurrency. At first, they're going to earn money through the cryptocurrency platform. But they don't know that the platform is being controlled by the perpetrator or the criminal. They will get ROI at first, and then eventually they will not get their money anymore. So in terms of Golden Triangle labor trafficking scam, it happens when Filipinos are recruited as customer service representatives abroad, and then they are made to recruit fellow Filipinos or other Filipinos to work with them. And when they are working as CSR abroad, they are put in dire conditions. they are given solitary confinement, and as well as they are not made to leave the Philippines, or they're not made to leave the foreign country unless they recruit someone else in what we call palit ulo. So they cannot leave the workplace, without recruiting somebody else. So I'm told my time is up, so I'll just show you some brief data before I close. So this is the number of repatriates as of May 2023, and how much the Philippine government spent for repatriation in terms of this specific problem of trafficking in persons. So that wraps up my presentation. There are other information about trafficking in persons. You may visit our website, yakat.gov.ph, and we also have a Facebook page. You will see there the different trends of trafficking, what the government is doing about trafficking, and how to report, namely the 1343 action line. And if you have any other questions, you can ask us or you can approach me after this. Thank you very much.
One of the hazards of having a written program is you see that we're running behind. The plan is to, and I'm going to call Hamid Qatar back up because he's, I believe, going to introduce this. We've arranged for a short survivors panel that we thought would be of interest to everyone. And then we'll take a break. I'm guessing you just add 30 minutes to everything on the program, and we'll be about right. Worst case scenario, you have to eat a little faster at lunch, or you can stay longer at lunch. But Hamid, let you turn I think we're going to have to dispense with questions at this point, but maybe you can join me in thanking our panel for this opening session. Then, Hamid, you can come and introduce the next event.
Thank you so much, Professor Cole, panelist. So while we discuss solutions to protect the vulnerable, often voices of those most impacted are not heard. It is my honor to welcome to the stage a group of remarkable individuals whose journey of resilience and courage will serve as an inspiration to all of us and remind us why we are here today. I am grateful to the Philippines Survivor Network. She works, and I would like to invite to the stage the moderator of the session, Ms. Melanie Olano. Please, the floor is yours.
Umaga po sa ating lahat. I'm Melanie Olano and I work at International Justice Mission Philippines. I am a social worker and I serve as the Senior Lead Advocacy for the National Aftercare Development. And I would like to invite here two of our survivor leaders from the Philippine Survivor Network, Ashira and Mary from She Works Made in Hope. Please join me here. So this plenary session for survivors of trafficking and online sexual exploitation of children aims to provide a space and opportunity to hear survivor voices through their stories, insights, and reflections from their experiences. So this session is an opportunity for us to hear the challenges they've experienced and their recommendations to various stakeholders. So I would like to request everyone not to take photos or to record any videos from your phones. So just allow our cameras set by the organizers And we want to respect the privacy of these survivor leaders and at the same time, confidentiality of their identity. Okay, so without further ado, I would like to call our first resource person, Mary, a survivor of labor trafficking and sex trafficking, who serves at Made in Hope She Works, a faith-based organization that empowers women survivors of trafficking through formation and sustainable economic programs. So let's give a round of applause for Mary.
Good day to all of you. My name is Mary, a resident women leader of Made in Hope Seaward. As a leader, I help women survivors of sex trafficking, as well as their children. I do home visitation in community, teach livelihood skill, and co-facilitate topic about women. With my fellow survivor, I lead social puppetry workshop among children and communities. I was trafficked when I was 7 years old in the United Arab Emirates domestic helper. At the time, we were so poor that I thought of helping my parents by work abroad to earn additional income. When I arrived there, I found out they did not have permanent employer. The head of the agency made work in different households. I worked with 8 families in 9 months. I had to laundry all day long until my hands got sore. I only had 2 hours sleep a day. I also experienced eating goat's food. And I also received beating because my employer's wife got jealous of me. I had opportunity to go home to the Philippines. Truth, an Arab man was a Filipina, but he did this exchange of sexual favor. I was so desperate. When I went home, I was heavy debt, so I decided to work in Manila, but I could not find work. Until I had only 10 pesos in my pocket, a man approached me and feed me. Then they took me to a motel and sent them. I became one of the street girls in Cubao. They experienced many bad things, like beating by customer and police brutality. I also became addicted to drugs to listen myself and also stay awake at night. My worst experience was when a customer stabbed me many times, strangled me. And it was a miracle that I survived. An NGO helped me, but I was not treated very well because the staff and even the pastor locked down on me. My biggest challenge was my journey toward transformation. I would earn money, but I gradually learned to be content with earning from the skill that I had. Like doing house at chores and sewing, even if the fee was smaller, it was so good to spend money, knowing that I was able to produce something from hard work. Now, I have learned how to save and budget my money, and my character began to change too. As I received love from others, I have also learned how to care for others. What was most helpful to me on my journey toward healing and restoration and when I got involved with the mystery of Seawards, where the activities and programs that I attended shaped me as a survivor leader. I gradually learned to do computer work, speak in front of other people, and share my life transportation to my fellow survivor. Most of all, I have been led to know Christ more deeply in my life. My views in the have changed positively. I am thankful not only for Seward, but also for other organizations like IGM, other, because we engage with their survivor. I feel accepted by them, even with all the bad things that happen in my life. I will never wish all the things that I have learned, so that there will be more Marys like me, who will be restored and transformed. My recommendation to various stakeholders in protecting children are the following: awareness raising on how to protect children, like the OSEC bad touch puppetry that we conduct at Seward. Endorse that law against labor trafficking, for example, recruiting minors, will be strictly implemented by the government. Strengthen educational program for the youth that would enable them to complete their education and acquire good employers. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mary, for sharing your story, your courage, your insights, and even recommendations to the issue of human trafficking. At this point in time, we will now hear a story of Ashira from the Philippine Survivor Network, a survivor-led network of more than hundreds members, and at the same time, survivors of IJM, different case type like child sexual abuse, commercial sexual exploitation, and online sexual exploitation of children from Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. So again, let's give a round of applause to Ashira.
I'm a survivor leader, serve as one of the officers at the Philippine Survivor Network or PSN, and currently studying Bachelor of Elementary Education. And I want to share my story. Way back 2011, when I was only 10 years old, I became a victim of online sexual exploitation of children. It is because of my neighbor. Happened when I was playing outside their house. Even though I was not the only kid present at that time, our neighbor chose me. She called me and asked me if she could take a photo of me for some money. Being a 10-year-old girl with an innocent mind, I agreed because of the money she offered was something my parents can't afford to give me. After the incident, our neighbor told me that I cannot tell this to my parents or else they will get the money from me. I believed her and kept quiet. For the next 2 years, she would abuse me again, asking me to take disgusting photos. It was only until I needed to live with my grandmother that the abuse stopped. A few years passed after the incident. When I was already a 15-year-old student, I met IJM. They, together with the police and social workers, rescued me. I had no idea what was happening at that time. They told me that I'd been rescued and the reason why. A police officer showed me some pictures which were taken a few years ago by our neighbor. A photo they used to make profit. The moment I saw those pictures, I burst into tears. My heart was aching, and I felt like my world was crashing. The officers were asking me about what happened. How come our neighbor has a photo of me without clothes on? I can speak for myself. Because all the trauma that I went through, all the things I'm forced to do, and I am forced to forget, came back and were now haunting me. And I didn't know how to cope with it. What made me burst into tears? When I saw my younger sister's pictures that made her do the same thing they made me do. They brought us to a shelter where we stayed for 1 year and 6 months. There, hatred grew in my heart, that at some point I questioned God. Did He allow this to happen? I never expected that God would answer me for a few weeks after I asked that question. During our weekly Bible study, He did. In that way, I suddenly realized that God does really answer us. During the Bible study, I learned that He doesn't want us to hang with our questions. God's work wasn't immediate, but He would guarantee us that it was the best answer we could ever have. And after that session, I cried and I began to read the Bible. I can say that the Bible is the answer that God wants us to know. And the verse I want to share is in Romans 8:28, and it says, "And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, and for those who are called according to His purpose." And this scripture brings comfort, direction, and hope to me every day. And from that day, I knew that God will never fail us. And as a survivor leader, I strongly recommend that the rights of the victims of online sexual exploitation, encompassing the ability to request content removal and seek reparations, be recognized and prioritized to address the harm inflicted, empower survivors, and foster a safer digital environment. Governments, regulatory bodies, and platforms must establish clear guidelines and mechanisms to support victims of online sexual exploitation and exercising their rights to request content removal and seek reparations. Adequate training and resources should be provided to empower victims and facilitate their engagement in the process. Legal framework should be strengthened to hold perpetrators accountable, and comprehensive support services, including the financial restitution, healthcare, counseling, education, and vocational training, should be made available to aid victims' recovery, healing, and reintegration into society. By prioritizing the rights and well-being of victims, society can take significant steps toward addressing the harm caused by online sexual exploitation and fostering a safer and more supportive environment for those affected. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ashira, for trusting us of your story and for sharing your recommendations to our various stakeholders. So we pray for both of you as you continue your recovery and healing and even the advocacy that you are doing. So once again, thank you very much for listening with us.
I would like to thank the survivor, Mary and Ashira, IGM, Philippines Survivor Network, She Works, and the police, and everyone who worked actually to protect the communities. And I hope that the powerful testimony serves as a wake-up call to all of us, urging us to confront the risk faced by vulnerable section of our communities. Many victims are not able to be heard or defend themselves. We need to make sure that they are not forgotten. We will now have a 15 minutes break, after which we will proceed directly to the breakout sessions. The discussion and the breakout will play an important role in shaping our recommendation for the G20 Agenda 2023 and beyond. You will already have received information on which session you have been allocated to. You can check with any of the organizers in case you are not clear on your session. After the breakout session, we will convene again here for the lunch. Once the break ends, participants in the breakout session on child exploitation will remain in this room. Other participants are requested to follow the volunteers' signs with their session name. Before we break for the coffee, I would like to invite everyone to come in front for the stage to take a group photo if you don't mind. So please, if you can come